Here's the intro. Greetings every person watching this video, and welcome to Danny's Review Show. So at this point it's been a few months since I uploaded my video on the games of Sonic Mega Collection Plus, an updated version of Sonic Mega Collection with additional games and mostly different extra content. Well, the very next year after Plus's release, Sega released a follow-up collection of Sonic games. This time around though, they decided not to release the same Genesis games they have for the past few collections. Instead, they released a game known as Sonic Gems Collection, which contains mostly games that have never been re-released at that point, at least not on console. This game was released exclusively on GameCube, in North America. Of course, in Europe and Japan, it was also released on PS2, which is kind of baffling that that version wasn't released here as well. But considering how the PS2 and PS2 games don't like to work as much these days, it's not the worst thing in the world. So releasing it on GameCube instead was the better way here. Or at least it would be if GameCube discs didn't rot faster than PS2 and Xbox discs. So sadly, the GameCube will age faster due to that. So that begs the question, why wasn't this game released on Xbox as well? There's a weird history of games around that time being released or not being released on certain systems in certain places. What was I talking about again? Oh right, Sonic Gems Collection. Why don't I do what I did with Mega Collection Plus and take a look at the menus and extras before the games? Without wasting any more time, let's get to that. Sega! If you love seeing classic Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, Amy, Robotnik, and Metal Sonic, boy is this a title screen for you. This game has a lot of pleasing visuals to the backgrounds. I mean, if you're not a big fan of a lot of things going on in the background, it might not be that pleasing, but it's still nice. The game list menu is nice, but I do kind of wish it was like Sonic Mega Collection Plus, where the backgrounds show off the gameplay of whichever game you currently have highlighted. But that's just a little preference of mine, and it's not a big deal. If you notice on the left side of the titles, they have letters like AG, SCD, SS, and most of them saying GG. I'm sure most of you already know what they mean, but for those who don't, I'll get to that when I get to the games themselves. Assuming I remember to. Of course we have a menu for the manuals for the games. What's interesting here is that they also have manuals for the PC versions of Sonic CD and Sonic R. Again, if I remember to, I'll talk about that when I get to those games. Now, the museum in this game is in some ways not as good as Mega Collection and especially Mega Collection Plus's museums, or extras menu, but it mostly gets the job done and has a few things that stand out. With the exception of a couple of games, instead of having to unlock certain games, this time you mostly unlock pictures and movies. I still wish it wasn't quite that way, but I do like that better than having to unlock a ton of games through playing nearly every game an absurd amount of times. One thing that's new about this museum is that you have a few different tracks you can play. There's not that many, and I think you have to unlock them, but I can't remember that for sure. But whatever the case is, it's a nice touch. Anyway, the museum overall is fine. Yeah, you can look up most of these images and more online. But in 2005, access to good internet was still in its infancy, so this was a good alternative for the time. Something else that's in the museum that really makes it stand out is challenges. By that, I mean you play certain sections from previous Sonic games in a certain amount of time. As of this recording, I only have 2 unlocked, but I'm sure there's more. You don't really get much for it, if anything, but it's still a cool little feature. Moving on to the last menu, we have hints. These are also things you have to unlock, but when you do, you can also see them as you play the games. They're just here for, well, I guess to show which ones you have unlocked. And we also have credits here. And that was Sonic Gems. Oops, I did it again. We still have games to look at. Starting off the list, we have Sonic the Fighters, also known as Sonic Championship, but mostly Sonic the Fighters. This is the only game out of this list that I have reviewed before on this channel. It was the 3rd episode of the Dangit Show, so it's been a while. If you're wondering what the AG next to the title means, it means arcade game. I'm pretty sure. This, at the time, was the only way to play this game at home. Outside of paying a lot of money for an actual arcade cabinet. There was going to be a Sega Saturn port, but obviously that didn't happen. We have 8 characters to choose from, with 2 making their only playable appearance in the franchise. Of course, starting out, I chose Sonic. No matter what character you use, the path is the same for every character. So you start off by facing Knuckles in South Island, aka basically Green Hill. Given that this is the first fight, you can imagine that this is the easiest fight in arcade mode. Also, given that this is an E-rated game, instead of blood you have rings. The controls work relatively fine. I mean, this is a game where for the most part you just mash the punch button and you can win that way. But there are many different attacks and combos you can use to spice things up. Knuckles was a pushover since he was the first opponent, so moving on to the next opponent we have Amy in her original design at Flying Carpet. You actually have limited blocking in this game. By that I mean you only have a certain number of barriers you can use to block your opponent's attacks. Luckily though, it doesn't pull a Mortal Kombat 2 and give your opponents the advantage, so they have a limited number of barriers too. I rarely ever block in fighting games, so I set it to just one barrier to knock out the opponents a bit quicker. The next fighter is a very iconic character in the franchise. I'm kidding, it's Bark the Polar Bear in Aurora Icefield. It seems like he should be stronger, but of course he's not, at least not here since he's only the third opponent. The graphics at the time were pretty good. Yes, they look pretty dated by today's standards, given that everyone is very polygonal looking, but for an arcade game in 1996, they're pretty good. The next fighter is Espio from the Chaotix and Mushroom Hill from Sonic & Knuckles. The sound design is also pretty good. It's mostly cartoony sound effects with some boxing bells thrown in. The music is also decent, not my favorite in the series, but still a decent soundtrack. I don't really have an opinion on the voice acting, probably because there pretty much are no voices in the game. There is a slight chuckle from Robotnik, but that's about it. Next character to fight is our best friend, Tails on the Canyon Cruise. This is where the game is noticeably more difficult, not unbeatable, but harder. Tails feels a bit overpowered here, but I'm pretty sure it's due to the AI knowing when to attack more. The next fighter is Fang the Sniper / Knack the Weasel in Casino Night. He's been playable in about 1 or 2 other games, and the rest he's been in have been cameos. Of course he's gonna have an advantage, he's got a freaking gun. It's a pop gun, but still, in fighting games, they're pretty much cheap to use. So you better believe I spam the crap out of those moves whenever I use an armed character in fighting games. But like Tails, he may be harder, but he's not unbeatable. And the next opponent is another iconic character. I'm kidding. It's Bean the Dynamite in Dynamite Plant. Is there a bird called Dynamite? No, apparently he's a woodpecker. Then why did you call him Dynamite? Anyway, the difficulty is a tad higher here, as expected. I did set the game to easy mode, so that's probably why I've made it this far. But I will say I do like the difficulty balancing in this game, as it only gets harder as you progress, as fighting games should. Not adaptive difficulty, but the next level getting harder. Before I move on from Bean, I should mention that when it comes to characters that use weapons, Amy, Fang, Bean, you can actually use their weapons against them. I don't have footage of it, but when you use the right moves at the right time, you can grab their weapons and use them against their owners. Like tossing Bean's own bombs into his mouth. Now of course your opponent can do the same to you if you use one of those characters, but hey, fair is fair. And the final opponent, out of all the playable characters, is none other than Sonic himself in Giant Wing from Sonic 2. Sonic must fight his inner black and white demon, himself. And yes, whatever character you're using, once you get to their level, you fight a black and white clone. I think whenever you're doing 2-player, whoever chooses the character first is the regular colored character. That or the second player used the black and white character, I can't remember for sure, I didn't have a friend with me to test it out. Anyway, once you beat Sonic, you use all 8 emeralds to power Tails' rocket. The number of emeralds wasn't really established at that point, or I guess not set in stone. Anyway, the character uses the rocket to go to Robotnik's Death Egg 2. And here, we start off fighting Metal Sonic in the Death Egg Eye. Well, there goes the fair difficulty progression. Metal Sonic is an overpowered piece of crap. You can tell he has different moves from different characters, and boy does he use them. He also takes way too much health from the player. I swear he can take you out in 2 moves. This is one thing I can't stand about mostly older fighting games, making the semi-final fight extremely difficult. I get why it's so hard, but this isn't fun, it's frustrating. In these kinds of fights, if you win, it doesn't feel like you overcame a challenge, it feels like you got lucky. Metal Sonic is to Sonic the Fighters what Goro is to the original Mortal Kombat. But once you finally beat him, you get to the last fight, Dr. Robotnik himself. Well, Robotnik in a mech suit, but still. Now this fight will be incredibly easy? Not saying it can't be hard, but I feel like Metal Sonic is the real final battle, whereas Robotnik feels like a quick win-or-lose challenge. There's only one round, and Robotnik is definitely a pushover. Well, once you beat him, the Death Egg 2 blows up and you win the game. While the credits play, you can actually see short replays of your victories at the bottom left of the screen. Before we go, let's take a quick look at some of the other fighters. I'll be using Knuckles as the punching bag. Sorry, Knuckles. All the characters have some similar moves, but each one has some unique moves as well. It can be pretty fun to try and pull off some different combos. I used to think this game wasn't all that good, but now I think it's a decent little fighting game. There are definitely better fighting games, but this is still a good one. Now, if you want the best version of this game on console, it's currently downloadable on PS3 and Xbox 360 for only $5, I think. And the 360 version is compatible with Xbox One and Series X and S. That was a mouthful. Apparently it's also playable in the game Lost Judgment, which is random but awesome. Also, like I mentioned in my Dang It Show video, the arcade machine is in Wreck-It Ralph, which in the story is why Sonic is in that movie and the sequel. Anyway, I would recommend this game. Now let's move on to the next game on the list, Sonic CD, or Sonic the Hedgehog CD if you want to get technical. Now, given how much this game has been reviewed, I won't be here too long. Now, since there's an SCD next to the title, you can take a wild and crazy guess that this is the Sega CD game. Though if you guessed that, you'd be wrong about this version. This is in fact the PC version of Sonic CD, which is why the PC version's manual is included in the manuals menu. After seeing how the actual Sega CD version of this game is, this was the better choice. Not that it's bad, but you know. Anyway, this is one of those games where you have to wait a few seconds at the title screen before seeing the opening cutscene. After that, we can finally start the game. But if you can wait a few minutes, Sonic, I'll be right back.
I'm out of here!
Alright, I'm back. And, hey, where's Sonic? Okay, yeah, I know, just about everyone who knows Sonic CD knows about this, but I just couldn't resist making the joke. Anyway, Sonic CD is almost like the Super Mario Bros. The Lost Levels in some ways. What I mean is, this was originally going to be the sequel to the original Sonic game. The difference is, this actually feels like a different game, whereas Mario the Lost Levels feels like just an expansion of the original Super Mario Bros. For those of you who don't know all that history, look it up, I've got a show to do, I hope you understand. Anyway, the controls do feel a bit different, but they're still good. Now obviously a lot of people are a big fan of the music, and I'm no exception. Well, maybe a little bit. I do think the music is good, but it's not my favorite, even out of the classic series. Also, I prefer the US soundtrack, it just sounds better in my opinion. Since this music was made with the CD in mind, they were able to pull off better, higher quality sound. It sounds old today, of course, but for the time it was good. The graphics are better-ish. It just doesn't look like that much of an improvement over the first two Sonic games. Maybe a little bit, but not much. The gameplay itself is fine if you're doing a casual run, but when you're trying to get everything, it's not that fun anymore. I will admit this one is easier than the first two, but that's only because you can save it, so there's not as much pressure. You have two different options to get the good ending for the game. The first option is to go to the past to destroy these mechanical things Robotnik has placed around. I didn't get footage of it because, well, I didn't even try that way. See, you run through these past and future gates, where after touching them and you're running fast enough non-stop, you can get transported to the past or future. This does make a difference in the environment, so that's interesting. But the problem is, the future gates are a waste of time, no pun intended, because it just hinders your progress. Those machines are in the past only, so if you go through a future gate, then you'll have to go find a past gate, go to the present, and then find another past gate, and then go to the past and destroy those machines. But luckily, the second option is a lot better. Gather 50 rings and get to the goal, where you can jump in a giant ring that takes you to the special stage, like in the first Sonic. These special stages are better than the first two games' special stages, but it's still not that great. This is a very early prototype of Sonic Roboblast. Also, this is the first time we see Sonic in a 3D space. Kind of. Alright, here we go with the first boss. I'll have to think of a strategy. Never mind. The next stage is where we first see Amy. Actually, not really, but most probably see her here first. This is also where we first see Metal Sonic. And this is where I'll end the review of this game. Sonic CD overall is okay. It controls well enough and the music and sounds are good, but the game just doesn't have good level design for what you need to do. I won't claim to be in the minority when I say that this game isn't that good, because after this game's Christian Whitehead release, I think a lot of people saw that the game isn't as great as they once thought. I remember everyone putting this as number 1 on their top 5 best Sonic games lists. So for a while, I did too, but when I formed my own opinions on things more, I realized this game isn't that great. Not at all bad, but not great either. Now let's move on to the only other 3D game on this list, Sonic R. Yes, this one has been reviewed a lot too, but I might have a little more to say about this one. Now, like Sonic CD, despite the logo saying SS for Sega Saturn, this is actually the PC version of Sonic R. If you know how the actual Saturn version of this game is, you'd understand. Traveler's Tales made this game. Only they didn't change their logo to the 2 T's until like 2005. Oh right, this collection came out in 2005. Still, that's kinda weird that they would change it, but whatever. On to the title screen with the interactive 3D R. Of course we have, 9 characters to choose from. One extra from Mario Kart 64's character selection. Yeah, take that! Sonic is way better than Mario! Now doesn't that sound stupid, people who still compare the two at this day and time? Anyway, 5 of them have to be unlocked, but just ignore that and let's head on to the gameplay.
Ready, set,
Can we just talk about this for a minute?
go!
Sorry, I couldn't resist. JonTron has an old video talking about this game. I say talking about because it's really not good as a review, assuming he meant for it to be so. Sorry, John. I still love you though, Boo Bear. There's also a video from RelaxLX clarifying things about this game and giving a second opinion on it, which is a pretty good video you should check out after watching this. So what do I think of Sonic R? Well, I like the concept of the game. Instead of being in cars, the characters are using their feet. Well, Sonic and Knuckles do anyway. Tails gets a running start with his feet, but then uses his tails to move after going fast enough. Otherwise, all the others either float or move by other means. My point is, I like that it's not just everyone being in cars, and the game has a tad bit of platforming. Not to mention the added detail of having different weather in the levels at random, and said weather can have different effects on the levels is neat. There are also a few different game modes to play around with, so it's not just racing. The execution of the game? A lot of us know about the infamous controls of the game, how stiff they are. The graphics have most certainly aged. The way you have to collect the emeralds and unlock the characters can be frustrating. And there are only 5 levels in the whole game. As for the music, I'm kind of split down the middle about it. All of this just makes the game not fun to play. For the most part. For the time, I'm sure it was fun, and as a joke, it can be fun today. But as a racing game altogether, it's creative, but not well executed. But again, I do like the concept, and I would be interested in seeing another 3D Sonic racing game where most of the characters race outside of their vehicles. That isn't a mobile game. We did at least get a couple of side-scrolling Sonic racing games via Sonic Rivals 1 and 2, but I would like to see another on-foot Sonic racing game sometime, maybe something similar to Rayman Rush and Rayman Arena. Anyway, this game is okay if you're in the right mood. It's definitely not worth getting a Sega Saturn for, but if you can find Jim's Collection or a PC that can run the game, if it's cheap, then it might be worth checking out. Now as for the rest of the Sonic games, we'll be taking a look at the Game Gear titles. Starting off the list is Sonic the Hedgehog 2. This is even less like Sonic 2 on Genesis than Sonic 1 on Game Gear is compared to Sonic 1 on Genesis. Anyway, let's check it out. Boy, I sure can't wait to go on this adventure alongside my buddy. Is it possible that this game takes place before Sonic 2 on Genesis? So in this game you have to rescue Tails, even though Tails is right there. This has been covered a lot, so let's just get to the gameplay. Instead of starting off in Emerald Hill, we start off underground. Excuse me, underground with a space. Anyway, you can tell right away that there will be some screen crunch issues. Also, a lack of the spin dash is a good sign, but at least I found the secret room with a life in it. I won't be too long here, but I can tell you that Sonic 2 on Game Gear is I've never really gotten past the first third of the game, but that's because of the screen crunch. There are too many hazards in the way, but there is something that makes this easier. The Game Gear games in this collection have an option to use save states, and new to the Sonic compilation games, quick saves. Quick saves let you save and load your games quicker. They're only saved for as long as you're playing the game, but they are pretty useful. They're pretty common these days, but this was a nice new feature that I never really used as a kid. Anyway, this game does have some gimmicks in it that make it unique, and same goes for the levels, though they're nothing to really write home about. Basically, like some of the previously mentioned Sonic Game Gear games, play the Master System version of this game if you can. I'm sure if I got more used to it I could get into it more, but that's kind of a hard thing to do. Next game is the Game Gear version of Sonic Spinball. I'm sure some compromises were made to get this game running on Game Gear, but I'm sure it's a nice little... Oh dear. Yeah, this version is a bit infamous for how bad the physics are. Like, if the Genesis version made you want to pull your hair out, get ready to get addicted to them cigs. There's really not much else to say. It's basically a downgraded bootleg feeling version of Sonic Spinball. Although the bonus rounds are quite interesting. In the Genesis version, they were set up kind of like a regular pinball machine, but here it's not that. You collect rings by using your pinball physics, but ultimately it's not a very good game. I'm not really sure if there is a Master System version of this game, but I can tell you that if there is and it's like this, just don't even bother. It's too bad because it would have been nice at the time to have a unique pinball game on the go. Oh well, we have other ways to play the Genesis version on the go these days. Next up is Sonic Treble, aka basically Sonic 3 on Game Gear, but not really actually, it's just because Knuckles is here. Let's start up Sonic Press Start Treble. This is very similar to Sonic Chaos, where you have a choice of using Sonic or Tails. I mean, I know you could use Tails in games before this, but you know what I mean, the menu here. We'll start off as Sonic, of course. Speaking of Sonic Chaos, this feels a lot like that game. It's not one-to-one, but this basically feels like the successor to Sonic Chaos, which is good since Sonic Chaos was one of the better Game Gear titles. You have a similar look, you have some gimmick crates or TVs or whatever, and it just uses so much from Chaos. But of course, the one thing that kind of brings it down is the screen crunch. It is understandable why they did that for the Game Gear, it didn't exactly have the biggest screen. But I still wish something better could have been done. Well anyway, Tails also pretty much plays the same as how he did in Chaos. I have played quite a bit of this game, but I still haven't beaten it. That darn screen. If you like Sonic Chaos, you'll probably like this one too. How good it is in comparison is up to you. But from what I've played, it's fine. The next game is Sonic Drift 2. This is one of those games where the sequel came out internationally, which means at the time in the US, we only got Sonic Drift 2. I'm sure that didn't confuse the hell out of anyone at the time. It could have been worse. Could have been in Final Fantasy VI's shoes. I do feel like they should have called it something like Sonic Drift Championship to not make it sound like a sequel as much. Or they could have gone with Europe's title, which is Sonic Drift Racing. I mean, what the heck, Sega of America? Now, the previous game wasn't really good unless you like games like Pole Position, and this one plays similarly to the first game. So I was prepared to rip into this game as well. But instead, this game surprised me. Somehow, it just feels better to play. I mean, of course you have obvious improvements like new characters such as Knuckles, Metal Sonic, and Knack/Fang, and new tracks that have more detail to them. But I just wasn't expecting the game to feel not bad. I actually got a little more footage than I was originally planning on because I was kinda having fun. The drifting feels a lot better, and the controls overall just feel good for what it is. Now don't get me wrong on all this. There are definitely better racing games out there, even from the time. But for what it is, it's a surprisingly decent game. It kind of felt like going from Sonic Rivals to Sonic Rivals 2, which if you know me, you know I find Rivals 2 to be a huge improvement over Rivals 1. The difference being that I still feel like going back to Rivals 1 time to time, whereas Drift 1, I don't feel like going back too much at all. Anyway, Sonic Drift 2 is a big improvement over its predecessor. That's not really a huge accomplishment, but still, it's a good game. So now it doesn't bother me that only Drift 2 came out in North America as much. Now onto a game that, like Sonic Drift, was originally released exclusively in Japan. Tails Skypatrol. Or I guess it's actually meant to be Tails is Skypatrol, like Knuckles is Chaotix. Yeah, I'm not doing that. This game is very Japanese, and it kinda has an old cartoon vibe to it. Embarrassingly enough, as a kid I never got past the tutorial, at least as far as I can remember. But when I recorded this, I had an adult brain with me, so I did a lot better. It definitely takes some getting used to, but once you have it down, it can be fun. It's an auto-scroller, so you have to make sure to dodge things and grab things with the ring Tails throws around and also attacks with said ring. I did so well this time around that I actually made it to the second boss. Couldn't really figure out how to beat him, but hey, I still got to him. This game is pretty hard, and you better believe I spammed the crap out of the quick save. But like I said, if you can get used to everything, it can be a fun game. If you live in the US, I wouldn't really recommend going out of your way to get a Game Gear that can play this game unless they're both really cheap. But if you want to play this game in general, whether it be like that, a ROM hack, or in this collection, it can be fun. Now on to the last Game Gear title, as well as the last Sonic game on this list, Tails Adventure. Yep, just a few years before Sonic Adventure, we had Tails Adventure. Or I guess technically it's Tails... Oh wait, it is just Tails Adventure. This apparently takes place just a few years before Sonic and Tails met. So was Tails like 2 here? The game itself is surprisingly big for a Game Gear game. Not like that it's got huge levels, but there's just a lot to it. One thing that makes this game different from your typical Sonic game is the fact that you move a lot slower. Of course, this time around it makes sense, considering it's Tails and not Sonic. Also, Tails has bombs. And the enemies are birds. Bean, 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 bean. You still collect rings, but they're not as frequent as they are in other Sonic games. The gameplay feels nice so far, even though I don't always know where to go. Now I would be interested in playing through this game more, if it wasn't for one thing. This is a Metroidvania. Nothing wrong with that, but for me, it's very, very hard to get into that genre. I've tried to get into games where the whole point is to backtrack, but it's just not my cup of tea. The only 2 Metroidvania games that I really come back to time are the Tomba games. So yeah, I didn't play much of this for the video because I'm not into Metroidvanias. If you're into this game and other ones of the same genre, I'm happy for you. As for me, like I said, it's not my cup of tea. But I do think for what it is, it's a nice game. Before we end things, there are a couple of games left to talk about. Remember what I said before? With the exception of a couple of games, well, we're about to talk about that couple. To unlock these games, instead of having to play the games an absurd amount of times, you just have to play the collection itself in a certain amount of time. First we'll start with Vectorman for Sega Genesis, which you can unlock by playing the collection for 5 hours total. This is the one non-Sonic game that actually made it to the collection in the US. Look it up online to see what I mean by that. Trust me, I know what I'm doing. Actually I don't, because the secret cheat didn't work. Vectorman is apparently an Orbot that is cleaning up the trash left by the dirty, filthy humans in the year 2049. Some other stuff happens that involves evil plans and such, and we go on to the game. The game has an interesting art style and looks advanced for a Genesis game. I'm sure old Vector and the others have pseudo 3D graphics, but it still looked nice for the time. But like most Genesis games, it can be pretty challenging. This is almost like a faster paced Mega Man without getting upgrades after boss fights. I did manage to beat the first boss though. Okay, this next level will probably take me a little while to learn these new controls for this. So the next level we're now underwater, and possibly oil, to try and bring home that environmentalist message. There are some parts of the levels where I get confused on where to go, but I did get some enjoyment out of this game. I would recommend Vectorman despite how hard it can be. Not the best game, but it's a good one. Now for the other Genesis game, as well as the final game in this collection, Vectorman 2. This one you unlock by playing the collection for 7 hours, plus you have to play the first Vectorman at least once. Vectorman is taking the trash off. I think maybe, I don't really remember. Something about the way this looks is slightly unsettling, I guess is the right word. It may just be me, but something about the colors and the lighting just kind of rubbed me the wrong way. Anyway, the first level has Vectorman slowly helicoptering down from space. It's a bit of a drag, but it doesn't last forever. The next level, aka the real first level, is where you get back to those Vectorman roots and tree roots. This game doesn't have the best opening levels. I'm okay with how the first level was, but the next level I have a few issues with. For one thing, it's way too dark and a lot of the environment blends together. Another thing is that it already starts out confusing me on where I need to go. I didn't get very far in this recording, but I do know that the game does at least change up after the first few levels. It primarily plays the same as the first game. If there are any major changes, I didn't really notice them in terms of gameplay. You shoot the same and move the same. Maybe there's new power-ups, but that's all I can think of. But that doesn't mean the game is bad, it just mainly feels like an expansion of the first game. Overall, I'd probably recommend this one just as much as the first game. Like I said, not the best, but still good. And that, folks, was Sonic Gems Collection. While it doesn't have the greatest Sonic games in it, it is a good collection of games to play when you want to take a break from the same few Genesis games. While now I wish it would have come to more systems than just the GameCube in the US, that didn't stop me from having a good time. Nostalgia may be clouding my judgment a little bit, but I would recommend this game if you have a GameCube or Wii that plays GameCube games. Just make sure the game is reasonably priced. I hope you enjoyed this, ladies and gentlemen, and I would like to see what you think of this collection as a whole, or just any of the games I talked about today. Don't forget to like this video if you liked it, subscribe for more videos like this or any other types I make, and thanks for watching. This again? This is weird. Still not weird enough to really investigate it.